Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Good morning, Kieran. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks very much. I went to see The Cure at Wembley on Monday.
Really? You sound surprisingly chipper.
I've never seen Robert Smith so happy.
Really?
He even wandered off with a microphone and started singing. Yeah, right. Normally he's hiding behind his guitar, but he was waving to the crowd and trying to crack gags, and it was wonderful to see.
It sounds a bit sinister to me. Are you sure that was a genuine smile, Kieran? He hadn't just lipsticked an upward curve on his face, had he? Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kieran. I know how much you love The Cure. So it's the idea of a happy Robert Smith, though. Crikey. Yes, World Cup semi-final, first one yesterday. I love Paris, Kieran, but I think it's probably for the best that I'm not there this evening while France and Morocco plays out live on the streets of Paris. It's Newsday, Kieran. Before we get into this week's news stories, and there are some big ones, a reminder that first ever Price of Football replica shirt is now available to pre-order. They're available in adult and kids sizes, and all the profits we make will go to Gambling with Lies, so it's all in a good cause. Finley doesn't like it. Every time I mention profits going somewhere else, Finley's going.
Well, that's his wonky chomp allowance being reduced. That's what he's worried about.
Finley's got the heart of a canine capitalist there, isn't he? As I say, all the profits are going to Gambleware, so it's in a good cause. Go to priceoffootball.com or our social media pages to get into our online shop. Apologies, of course, there may be some delays if you have ordered them, and I know many of you have already, with the way things are at the moment with various industrial actions that are going on. It might be some time before you get them. It definitely won't be before Christmas. I can guarantee that for nothing. It's Newsday, Kieran. Our first news story is a kind of prediction of a news story that we'll have to get into in more detail on Sunday, because we're expecting news from Europe tomorrow, aren't we, about the European Super League?
Yes, so the supporters of Super League, who explicitly are the owners of Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus, have put in a legal claim to the European Court of Justice. And the initial, it's not a ruling, but the initial decree is coming out on Thursday. So what the Super League supporters are saying is that UEFA has been operating as a monopoly in the sense that it's run the competition for its own benefit, as well as organised the competition. And that is anti-competitive. It is therefore against some of the central rules of EU law. And they are trying to allow a Super League to be set up as an alternate competition. Now, UEFA are saying, well, you're perfectly entitled to set up an alternate competition, but don't think that we are going to allow you to play in the Champions League in the interim period. And if the players that you have want to play in other UEFA competitions, such as the Euros, well, we might have an issue with that as well. And also some of the domestic leagues are uncomfortable because all of a sudden you've got, whilst it's a bit of a strange fight, the fight to finish fourth in the Premier League is quite interesting at times. And that would no longer apply. So the interest in the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, and so on, in the sense of having to qualify for competitions through success domestically, that will be completely decoupled by the Super League proposals, and the value of the domestic leagues would fall. There has been a report done. You always have to have a little bit of a raised eyebrow when you read these things. But it said that 95% of professional footballers would end up on less money because of the decrease in the value of domestic leagues throughout Europe. So that's where we are. I've contacted one or two lawyers that I know work in the should we say the sports space, or have a knowledge of this, and they seem to think that UEFA have a better case than that of Super League, and what could result is Super League either being a 3-club competition, which I don't think would be particularly attractive, or that there will be a few crumbs thrown at Super League, so to allow them to say, "Well, this is all due to the fact that we're a principled bunch of individuals at Juventus who are currently subject to financial repercussions in respect of wages. Barcelona, who were fined by the European Court for illegal state aid, and Real Madrid, who are also fined for taking illegal state aid. So these fine and upstanding clubs, it could be that they'll get a few words of solace, or we might have got it wrong, and they could be successful. And they're using a very silver-tongued and persuasive organisation called A22 to put forward their case. Which and every time they put something out on social media, I'm like a dog with a bone in terms of pointing out a few inconsistencies in what they report.
I think, to be fair to Juventus, Kieran, and all the people that have been running that club, even Uncle Terry had principles. It's just that some of those principles differed slightly from the rest of us. In the meantime, Kieran, the Premier League welcomes a new American owner to its ranks.
Yes. Hello, Bill Foley. I think there could be one or two changes at Bournemouth. He's bought Bournemouth from Max Demin for somewhere in the region of 120 to 130 million pounds is the noises that we're hearing. And given that comes with 2 years of effective 2 years of guaranteed parachute payments, and the last time that Bournemouth were relegated, they've got some pretty severe relegation clauses embedded into contracts, so their wage bill effectively halved the last time they did go down. It does seem to he's got a a reasonable price there. For people not familiar with Bill Foley, he is an American individual. He's 77 years old, so I think if there's some long-term projects in respect of Bournemouth, he's probably going to want to get those done as quickly as possible. And I know there's been talk about moving to a bigger stadium, or creating it's only got a capacity of 11,000. And if we do move to a wage cap in the Premier League, which is linked to revenue, then getting more money in is absolutely essential. His experience of sport is that he owns the Vegas Knights, Kevin, the Vegas Knights, who are based in Las Vegas. Now, when I think of Las Vegas and weather, I think I probably would not be sitting, as I am presently sitting, with a hot water bottle and a duvet wrapped around me, trying to keep warm. So it's slightly unusual, therefore, that Bill Foley introduced ice hockey to Las Vegas with the Vegas Knights. And initially it was quite successful, and then things haven't worked out perhaps as well as he's liked recently. I think it's fair to say that he's a hands-on style of owner, so that there is talk about him moving to the south. Bournemouth's finances, they owe Maxim Denim's holding company, which is based in that paragon of transparency, the British Virgin Islands. It owed them £128 million in their last accounts. He's since lent them a further £24 million. They've also borrowed money from our good friends at Macquarie, the Australian specialist, against their future TV monies. So what Bill Foley is inheriting is uncertain. I think it's like Max Demin has probably had to take a bit of a haircut in terms of the money that he's put into the club. I don't think he'll be getting the full amount back, but the club's been up for sale to 3 to 4 years, and I think he's gone as far as he can go with Bournemouth.
I'm sorry to hear, Kieran, that you're wrapped up in a dressing gown and a duvet, because I know for a fact that as we speak, producer Guy and his family are lying in a hot tub preparing next week's pod. ready for a quick sauna upstairs. In the end, we knew about his interest in Bournemouth for quite some time, Kieran, and it took a long time for it to happen. There are some people suggesting that maybe he was waiting to see what Bournemouth's league position was likely to be, because they're probably doing better than most people would have expected. So is that possible, or is it just that these things do take some time to complete?
I think there might have been an element of that. Bournemouth have done very well, and I think exceeded expectations. There's also the issue is that the Premier League is being very forensic in terms of its scrutiny of future owners.
Right.
It doesn't want to. So therefore, the owners and directors test has to be confirmed, and that's why we've not seen confirmation of deals that we're expecting at other clubs. Some of which might be appearing later in the show.
Now, Stockport County, Kieran, we know are a club that you have a lot of affection for, and they've taken part in an unusual signing this week, haven't they?
Yes, this is Phil Bardsley. Phil Bardsley, who's one of those players who you thought was what you would call a solid Premier League fullback. He's a 7 out of 10 man. Never spectacular. Always does a job, and he think he was at Manchester United, Sunderland, Burnley, and so on. He's joined Stockport County for the rest of the season. He was released by Burnley in the summer, and now he's been given a contract by County. But what he said is, I've been a Premier League footballer. I'm not going to take a salary as such. What I am going to do is I'm going to give it to the local community trust, which is a fantastic gesture.
Brilliant, yeah.
Because people say, well, he's earned a lot of money. Yes, he has earned a lot of money as a professional footballer, but he didn't have to do this, and he's done it. And I think that's the thing. There's some people that will always be trying to focus on their income. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that one at all. But he's been training with Stockport for a few months, trying to get his fitness back. He's had 1 or 2 injuries over the summer. And he said, well, as a way of saying thank you, given where he is in his career, he's now 37 years old, he's going to give his salary. And the way that this would work is that it will attract tax relief. So I think there's something called payroll giving or gift aid. So he won't pay tax on the salary, and the club. I don't think the club will necessarily have to go and pay him tax in terms of national insurance, but I'm not absolutely certain on that. So there's everybody wins here. Stockport get the experience of a former Premier League player. Phil Bardsley gets the opportunity to play football, and sometimes when you listen to footballers, especially when they reach the latter stages of their career, they just want to keep on playing, and you absolutely understand that. And the Stockport Community Trust gets some additional funds to put towards is going to be a really tough winter for many people.
Yeah, and those people who are cynical about his gesture, he's only 37. He's got many, many years of not playing football ahead of him. When you imagine his earnings potential is a lot less than it will be now, he could easily have said, yeah, thank you, I'll take this last few months of salary, but he didn't, so well done him. Having spent several afternoons watching Premier League football games with tabloid journalists, Kieran, I can tell you that they're all 7 out of 10 players that kick off. And then around about 20 to 5, they go, right, we'll make him a 9 and him a 5, because they haven't got time to look at all the players. And they send it off, and then the next morning, tabloid footballers get furious. So they're all 7 out. We spoke to the York City Supporters Trust earlier this year about their role in the change of ownership there, and they could be getting a chance to buy even more of the club.
Yes, for people not familiar, what happened was that the York City Supporters Trust have historically owned about 25% of the club. The other 75% was owned by a company called, I think it was called JPM or JM Packaging. And then in the summer, Stockport were very, very briefly owners of 100% of the football club. Yeah. And then they effectively immediately sold 51% to a gentleman called Glenn Henderson, who successful businessman in his own right. And that was as recently as July, and then we've seen in the past few days that he is now saying, "I want to sell." So he bought 51% of the club, so that allowed him to effectively control things on a day-to-day basis. The relationship between Glenn Henderson and the fans, and whilst I've not seen anything explicit from the trust, and I can understand why they've not said anything, I think there's certainly, in terms of relationship between him and the fans, hasn't really worked out.
Yeah.
He sacked the manager John Askey relatively recently. John Askey was very popular. He improved things on the pitch, and And then became one of these great words that you get from managers when they are relieved of their duties. He said, the owner was meddling with things.
Yeah.
And you go, all right, that means, is he making suggestions as to style of play, who should play, and so on. So what Glenn Henderson has therefore said is that sometimes relationships don't work out. It's time for me to get out. I'm going to sell the 51% to the trust at a no profit, no loss price, in effect, and the price will be set by an independent valuer, and that's good in one way. The downside is, I could get 10 people to do 10 independent values of York City Football Club, and we get 10 different prices, because trying to work out the true value of a football club is tricky, to put it mildly. So the position of the trust is that they say, well, we've got four options. A, we could try to buy the club through crowdfunding, but with the best will in the world, York City's got a limited fan base. We've got Christmas coming up. We've got inflation-related cost of living issues as well. So I think that could be challenging. It said we'd be willing to talk to a local consortium to see if they want to do things, because York City, we're on the show. It's hub, its identity, it's all of the positive things that we're always keen on. Or we could try to get a new investor, or we could simply say to Glenn Henderson, thanks but no thanks, we don't want your 51%. But I don't think that's in the interests of the club. If you've got an owner that doesn't want to be there, especially if the club's losing a wee bit of money, then decisions have to be made and budgets get cut, which isn't necessary. It isn't good from a fan's point of view.
Yes, of course. Well, that's a story we'll keep an eye on. And if any of our friends in the York City Supporters Trust want to give us any more insight, it would be very welcome. There's some slightly better news for Coventry City fans, Kieran, even if it's only temporary.
Yes. Mike Ashley did serve a notice of eviction to Coventry City very recently, and we've said, Cov's been on the price of football too often.
Yep.
But this is a wee step forward. What's happened is that Coventry initially had a 10-year rental deal with the former landlord. Mike Ashley is the new landlord, having bought Coventry Building Society Arena, as it's formerly known, from the administrators. And he's now agreed a deal which will take Coventry through to the end of season, which is good, because they don't be playing at Birmingham or Northampton or Walsall, wherever it was going to be. They've also got the benefit, from a fan's perspective, it's a lot easier to get to matches, so therefore the crowds are higher and so on. There have been some questions. Doug King, who is the likely owner. I think all that's outstanding is him being approved by the EFL in terms of the owners and directors test. He did offer more for the stadium. I've subsequently found out, but Mike Ashley had effectively a period of exclusivity with the administrators, and they'd agreed a price. So it's a bit of comfort for Cov fans in the sense that they know where they are now until May, and that gives them time to negotiate something on a more long-term basis.
Now, this next story, Kieran, I have a problem with. Because normally I try and set you up with a bit of pizzazz, so you can sprinkle some stardust. So I sort of hint as to what the story is, and then you give us the full details and the insight. With this one, I'm just going to read it out, and then I'm going to. If you give me a call when you've stopped talking about it, and I'll come back. We'll crack on, if that's all right. Because it says here the EFL has announced its appointees to the club financial review panel.
Yes. So there's been.
Go on, pizzazz that up.
Pizzazz that up, indeed. Yes. There's been a few creative accounting issues in the world of the EFL in recent years, and this has led to disputes, accusations, points deductions, various meetings held with sort of different points of judicial interpretation of the position. So what the EFL have said, look, instead of money leaking out of football on a regular basis, because if these things end up in court, it becomes very expensive. We've known that from talking to some of the sports lawyers. Let's have more of a negotiated settlement. And what we will do is, provided the football clubs vote in favour of this, we'll sort it out internally by having this club financial review panel, which is chaired by King's Counsel, Christopher Quintin, I think. It's got two what they refer to as football members, one of which is a guy called Nick Igo, who used to be the finance director at West Ham. I've met Nick. He's a very thorough individual. They've got two people who look at it from the perspective of auditors, one of which is the former head of Deloitte's football unit, Dan Jones. And the aim is to speed up disputes because if you think about what happened with Queen's Park Rangers, that dispute took 4 years to resolve. The ongoing issues with the likes of Sheffield Wednesday and Birmingham and Derby County, of course, they took a lot of time. So the aim is to get things sorted as quickly as possible, so that there's greater certainty for club owners, for fans, for managers, for everybody in the game, and also for other clubs, because we saw in Middlesbrough's accounts, which came out a couple of weeks ago, of a mysterious receipt of £2.7 million, where the club was a bit coy as to where it might have come from, but everybody's going, well, they did have a dispute with Derby County. Is this 2.7 million? Yeah, and that's taken 3 or 4 years to resolve as well. So the aim is to speed up the process, to reduce external costs. I think the people who are on this committee are attend on a as and when required, and they get a daily rate on the back of that.
I'm glad we discussed that issue, Kieran, because I got my last 4 Christmas cards written during that time. But just to prove I was paying attention and occasionally go, in the right places. Just down the road from QPR, who you mentioned, we have Chelsea. Oh. And for the first 2.5 years of this pod, Kieran, certainly until the terrible invasion of the Ukraine, we only really spoke about Chelsea in terms of how well they were doing and how financially solvent they were. But we just had a couple of stories that are no cause for concern, but they're not 100% positive like they used to. And there's a story about one of their sponsorship deals that's emerged this week, which is a slightly odd one.
Yes. Chelsea signed a sleeve sponsorship deal with an organisation called Whalefin, which is a crypto-based organisation. And Whalefin, we don't know the exact details, but the story was that they'd agreed to pay £80 million over 4 years, which is by shirt sleeve sponsorship is a fantastic deal. And they've also, I think they've got a deal with Inter as well. And the stories which have come out from Bloomberg and other sources, I think, in the past few days, is that deal is now being terminated. And this is on the back of a crypto crash, because there is a company called FTX, which is controlled by a guy called Sam Bankman-Fried, who, if you take a look at his Wikipedia page, he is described as 30 years old and a former billionaire. Now, which I thought was quite good. He's up before a congressional hearing. He formed this company called FTX in April 2019. About 6 months, about 4 or 5 months before we started The Price of Football. So we don't have former billionaires on our Wikipedia pages.
Well, only because Guy is still one. That's why.
Yes, that's right. Yes. But this has caused. This has been a huge crash. He gave the old spiel of, I'm going to introduce legitimacy and common sense into the world of these alternative monetary forms, and he's been living in the Bahamas in what's described as a lifestyle. Which sounds very good, but he's now potentially up for wire fraud and money laundering, which does mean that perhaps if the Bahamas are looking for a FIFA representative, he could be well sorted, because wire fraud and money laundering are words which we have associated with certain people to do with FIFA related shenanigans historically. So the ripple effect is that some of the other crypto industry organizations are saying we are temporarily halting people withdrawing money, and that's never a good thing. If you look at bank crises historically, when the banks say we're not going to let you take your money out, that normally is indicative of some fairly fair hijinks taking place in the world of finance. So Whalefin is sort of rippling off this, and it's looking at its cost base and saying, well, that £20 million to Chelsea, it looked like a lot of money at the time, and now it's looking a lot more.
Our next story, Kieran, takes us to Scotland. Our listeners in Wales may be particularly interested to know we do have an interview this week, but we are going to release it separately again because it's a decent length one, and it's with Hugh Jenkins, the ex-chairman of Swansea City, who tells us all about his near 2 decades at the club and gives us some insight into Welsh football. So that will be dropping separately, as Guy keeps telling me to say, several minutes after this one. But back in Scotland, which is a place we're always happy to visit, a very dear friend of mine, wonderful comedian Fred Macaulay, is a St Johnstone fan, so he will be interested in this story.
Yes, so the owner of St Johnstone, Jeff Brown, who bought the club in 1986, has said, it's time to move on. His son was chairman, but his son said that I don't want to be chairman anymore. St Johnstone have one of those clubs which are punched above their weight in terms of Scottish football, and good luck to them. So he is going to sell the club, and we spoke about York a wee bit earlier, in the sense of who's the likely buyer to be. Here, it would appear that he's going to dispose of the club, and it's going to go to the community trust, with the net proceeds. So there's always a bit of kerfuffle when there's a new change of ownership, but if it does go to the trust, or the proceeds go to the trust, then that's in a good cause. So I think there's been a few, along with the Phil Bardsley story, another community trust benefiting here. Not all in football is bad. I know a couple of weeks ago we did a show, and even you and I at the end of it, and we've been doing this for a few years ago, said to each other, blimey, that was really bleak.
Yes.
So it's good to have a few more positive stories to talk about this time.
Yeah, even our good friend Martin Searle, who drops a little weekly review of each show on Twitter, used the word bleak about that. There was a Christmas Carol vibe about that one without Tiny Tim, without Tiny Tim getting better at the end. Our final, sorry, that's a spoiler alert, wasn't it? Sorry about that, everyone, if you've not read the book. Tiny Tim gets better, everyone. Our last two stories. Well, he doesn't die. He might be carrying on in a lot of pain for all I know, but he doesn't die, let's put it that way. He gets better. It's my favourite book. Our last two stories, Kieran, take us to Manchester, and several people told us that they were raised their eyebrows at the amount of money that Arsenal owe to other clubs in transfer fees, but Man United are comfortably ahead of them.
Yeah, that they've given a major hold my beer moment to the world of football. Yeah, they owe, I think it's £306 million in outstanding instalments. So they've bought players on credit. They've paid a deposit. Normally you will put down X percent. So when Manchester United bought Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Palace, for example, they put down a 50% deposit and they said we'll pay you another 50% in a year's time. So the settlement of football transfers is something which is done in an instalments basis. They spent a lot of money in the summer of 2022. They've just published, and because they are listed in the New York Stock Exchange, they have to publish accounts on a quarterly basis. So this is for the first quarter of 22-23. Revenue's up, which is good, although broadcast revenue is down because they're in the Europa League instead of the Champions League. Wages have fallen, and wages were at a record level. But what Manchester United have is in their player contracts, and we mentioned something similar with regards to Bournemouth earlier. Manchester United, they either have big incentives in terms of wages if you qualify for the Champions League, or they have cuts if you qualify for the Europa League, depending on how you choose to interpret the document. But the wages bill is down. Although wages went down, overheads went up. And overheads went up by 40%, which is,
wow.
Which is a lot of money. And they said, "Oh yeah, but we had a pre-season tour this year." So I don't know whether they went on personal aircraft or they were staying in 7-star hotels. But to blame it on a pre-season tour seemed a bit harsh. And then they said, "Oh yeah, the Lecky bills, they've gone up as well." And I thought this just seems a bit strange, for a club the size of Manchester United to be saying, "Oh yeah, it's our gas and light bills have gone up," and that's right. They also said that they would have had a better financial performance had it not been for the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, because matches were postponed, and that had an impact upon revenues as well. So some very sort of some very surreal comments, and. One thing which does get fans worked up is the amount of borrowings and also the Glazer family. Well, in terms of the borrowings, Manchester United have hit a record level of £909 million in what we call football net debt. And this is used by UEFA. And this says, well, how much money do you owe to the bank? Take away any cash you got in the bank. How much money do you owe to other clubs for transfer deals? And we take away any money which is owed to you. So this is shot up by around about £250 million in 3 months, which is quite a spectacular achievement. I'd expect it to come down in due course. And on the back of that, the Glazers, who have been taking the lion's share of the £11 million in dividends, which has been paid out every 6 months, have said, we're not going to take a dividend now. And I think if they believe that they're going to get a lot of sympathy from Manchester United fans as a result of this decision, I don't think it's going to be coming their way. But the fact that for the first time in 6 years, Manchester United are not going to pay a dividend, I think is indicative that even though it's an amazingly cash-generative club, even they probably think that this is taking the mickey a bit, and therefore we're going to slow down. And the trouble is that other shareholders in Manchester United who don't have the surname Glazer, they're going, well, hold on, we normally get some of this money every 6 months as well. So we have therefore seen a fall in the Manchester United share price, and we said that it increased it by 75% in the course of 6 or 7 days following the announcement of the potential sale of the club. But that that is now starting to decline, and it fell around about 10% after these results came out.
Do you know what, Kieran? I feel slightly sorry for our poor late Queen, because she's getting the blame for a lot of things, which seem to me aren't her fault. Jeremy Hunt, for example, this week saying that the UK economy was slowed down dreadfully by the extra bank holiday we had to have for the Queen's funeral. It's like, there are a lot of reasons why the economy in this country is tanking, Jeremy, and I think the Queen comes way down the bottom of that list.
Yes.
Although I do like the idea, I have to say, of one of the Glazers actually having a press conference in Manchester to the local national press and saying, the Lecky Bill, the Lecky Bill's gone right. Really gone sky high, really in a broad New York accent. Meanwhile, Manchester City, and we discussed the idea of Bournemouth expanding their stadium right at the start of the show, Kieran, and Manchester City are exploring the same thing. Not the idea of expanding Bournemouth Stadium, expanding their own stadium, I should point out.
Yes. So the Etihad currently has a capacity of around about mid-50s. And there's talk about increasing the size because Anfield's going to 61,000. We've got Arsenal and Spurs in the low 60s. We've got Manchester United at 74,000, but I expect that to go higher in due course, depending upon who owns the club. Manchester City, they know that there's a chance that there will be these new financial and sustainability rules, so therefore they need to increase revenue. And one way of doing that is if you don't have a Super League to play in. I think they were always sort of my understanding is they were pretty reluctant Super League aficionados, is to increase your match day income. So increasing the capacity of the Etihad to low 60s. And also using that sort of land plot which they occupy to generate additional money on non-match days. And this is something that we've mentioned on many an occasion, is that football is a dumb industry in that it's got costs 365 days a year in terms of wages and lecky bills and so on. And it's got revenue on 25, 30 if you're lucky, depending upon your cup runs. And what clubs are trying to do is to address that particular issue. And if they build a hotel, there is a shortage of hotels in Manchester, I can assure you, as somebody that stays up there on a regular basis. And Gary Neville's built a hotel next to Old Trafford, City having one, which wouldn't be too far from the city centre, and it is on a tram link as well. So. It potentially could be cash generative for City.
Well, also you'll just get a lot of City fans who book a room to stay there just because it's the City hotel. I stayed in the hotel at Bolton's ground. I'm not a Bolton fan, but I was really excited. I woke up in the morning and opened the curtains and there was a football pitch in front of me. So if I was a Bolton fan, I'd have moved in. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. That includes Christopher Hartley, who says, I'm a big fan of the pod, which is entertaining and informative, but also shows great ethics. You may be surprised to hear that I've taken advice from the pod into my work at CERN. I am incredibly surprised to hear that, to be perfectly honest, Christopher. And by amazing coincidence, just 2 nights ago, I was discussing the Hadron Collider with my son Ed, who is probably better informed about things like this than I am, because I said, seems to me, Ed, that's a lot of money to spend on finding out what happens to an atom when you smash it at 1 million miles around a 12-mile-long tunnel. And Ed says, there's slightly more to it than that, Dad. Your the grasp of physical science isn't up to scratch. And he lent me a book, which I will no doubt get round to reading sometime. But thank you for that, Christopher. Christopher says to us, keep up the good work. And in brackets, why don't you publish the accounts of the pod? There's a good idea. I'll give you 2 reasons. Producer guy. That's 2 reasons. It's a question we've asked him on a regular basis. If you'd like to join Christopher Hartley by making a small monthly contribution to the pod, then please go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. The interview with Hugh Jenkins will be available in just a few short minutes' time. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, Patreon supporters. We do appreciate the way that you invest in the show. There's other ways that you can do that, and one of those is going onto your podcast app and giving us a review. If you can give us 5 stars, it helps us in the charts. It helps us with algorithms. It helps us having a bit of credibility when we approach people out of the blue and say, "Hey, we're two guys from South London doing a podcast about football finance. Would you like to come on the show?" And yeah, the fact that we are seem to get in the main pretty good reviews and are regularly in the charts just helps us with that credibility. It doesn't matter what you say in terms of narrative for the review. So you could say, you could even have it presented by Robert Smith of The Cure in Happy Mode and Mike Smash of Radio Fab, because I think those two would be an absolute spectacularly entertaining pair of presenters, and I'd certainly listen.
I don't think Robert Smith could keep it up that long, Kieran. It's all very well smiling away for a 3-minute song about love cats, but him and Mike Smash. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.